Hello, my name is Jesham Gabi. I welcome you to molecular biology. Lesson objectives are metabolic processes, anabolism versus catabolism, inorganic versus organic, types of organic molecules, monomers to polymers, biomolecular structures, and vitalism. You are welcome. Molecular biology. When we talk of molecular biology, this one focuses on investigating biological activity at a molecular level. So we want to understand the molecular biology, and we are saying that it focuses on investigating the biological activities at a molecular level. So that's what we are going to look at. We shall understand the biology of molecules, and we shall look at the biological activities. But when we are looking at those biological activities, we shall be looking at molecular level, the molecular substances. Molecular biology explains living processes in terms of the chemical substances involved. So it is explaining the living processes in terms of the chemical substances involved. So we are talking about living processes, but looking at the chemical substances that are involved in those living processes. For example, we have our chemical substances here. We have the carbohydrates, we have the fats, and we have the proteins. So these are the biological molecular molecules. The carbohydrates, they are used in the life processes where they can be broken down to glucose via sugars, different sugars, and this glucose can either be stored in the body as glycogen, or it can go and be broken down to pyruvate, acetyl coenzyme, and then taken to the Krebs cycle where it can be used to make energy. Then when we look at our fatty acids, these molecules can be broken down either to glycerol or into glycerol and fatty acids. The glycerol can be taken and used to prepare the RNA and DNA synthesis, whereas the fatty acids will be broken down to acetyl-CoA, where they can be taken to form other fatty acids, and then those fatty acids can be used to make phospholipids and then also to make other fats. But still, they can also go through and reach the Krebs cycle. Then the proteins, these ones are going to be broken down into amino acids. The amino acids can be deaminated to form ammonia, which can be taken to the urea cycle, and then they can be used to either synthesize other amino acid or released out of the body. So these are some of the substances, chemical substances, that are involved in the life processes. Now we want to look at the metabolic processes. Now, when we are talking about metabolism, metabolism is the totality of chemical reactions that are occurring in the cells or organism. All the chemical reactions that take place in the cell or an organism are what we refer to as metabolism. And these reactions are controlled by enzymes. All those reactions that are taking place in the body, which we are referring to as metabolism, are controlled by enzymes. And the enzymes, when they are performing their functions, their activities, what they are doing is an expression of particular genes. So enzymes are an expression, or enzyme expression or enzyme activities are regulated by activation of particular genes. So we have a lot of metabolic reactions that are taking place in the body, and these are chemical reactions which are controlled by particular enzymes. And those particular enzymes, their activities is an activation of a particular genes which are expressing their activities through the enzymes. Metabolic reactions, they serve two key functions. The first one is that they are a source of energy for the cellular processes, and those cellular processes is where we have growth, reproduction, where we have respiration, excretion, homeostasis, nutrition. All those processes, they get their energy from metabolic reactions. And still, metabolic reactions, they are used in the synthesis and assimilation of new organisms or new materials that are used in the cells. These new materials that are formed and are used in the cells, they are a result of metabolic reactions. For example, the synthesis of new organelles during cell division. In cell division, we are going to form new cells, but these new cells, they need organelles. So those organelles, when they are formed, that's what we call synthesis. And this process of synthesis is a metabolic reaction. So metabolic reactions are enabling the synthesis of new materials that will be used in the cells. Now, we also need energy for these cells to be formed. And this energy is going to be obtained by breaking down of molecules to obtain energy. For example, breaking down glucose and we get energy. This energy is going to be used in the making of the cells. But the process of breaking down glucose and getting energy, that one is called assimilation. And this assimilation process is a metabolic reaction. Therefore, metabolic reaction is going to enable the synthesis and assimilation of new materials for the use in the cells. Metabolic processes. Metabolic reactions, they can either be anabolic or they can be catabolic. And when we say anabolic, that means building up. And if we say catabolic, that one means breaking down. So all these reactions that are taking place in the body, they are either anabolic reactions, building up, or they are catabolic reactions, breaking down. For example, we have talked about the synthesis, where we are breaking macromolecules from simpler molecules. That means that we are building up. For example, amino acids, we build up the proteins. So that one, when we are building up, is what we call anabolic reaction. It's a metabolic reaction, which is anabolic. But when we are breaking down a bigger molecule to smaller molecules, for example, proteins being broken down to amino acids, that one is breaking a bigger molecule into a smaller molecule. Therefore, that type of reaction is called catabolic reaction. And it is a metabolic reaction, but of catabolic type, or breaking down. These reactions may involve organic molecules, or they may involve inorganic molecules. So all the reactions, the metabolic reactions, they can be involving organic molecules, or they can be involving inorganic molecules. We might be building up organic molecules or building up inorganic molecules, or we might be breaking down organic molecules or breaking down inorganic molecules. Therefore, metabolism is a web of all enzyme catalyzed reactions that are taking place in the cells or an organism. All those reactions, they are catalyzed by enzymes. And those reactions, they form what we call metabolism. Therefore, it is just a web. Metabolism, when you're talking about metabolism, it is a web of all enzyme catalyzed reactions which are taking place in the body or in a cell. All those anabolic reactions, catabolic reactions, reactions involved in respiration, reaction is involved in digestion, reaction is involved in reproduction, reaction is involved in excretion, in nutrition. All those reactions, we total them up as a metabolic reaction, and that is what we are referring to as metabolism. So it is a web of all enzyme catalyzed reaction that take place in a cell or take place in an organism. That is metabolism. Anabolic reactions build up complex molecules from simple ones. So when we get a complex molecule and it is coming from a simpler molecule, that one we are building up. And that one is an anabolic reaction. So, anabolic reaction, we are building complex molecules from simpler molecules. We gave an example of proteins. When you are building proteins, you are going to build them from simpler molecules, which are amino acids. You get amino acids, react them with other amino acids, you get a product which is a protein. And that protein is a complex molecule, which means that that reaction has been an anabolic reaction because you have ended up building up a complex molecule coming from a simpler molecule. Now, this includes the formation of macromolecule, which is the protein, from monomers. Now, our monomers are going to be the amino acid, the simple units or subunits, which are reoccurring to form a macromolecule, which is a protein, a bigger molecule, which has been made up of smaller molecules. Now, the smaller molecules are the ones that we are calling the monomers, and the bigger molecules are the macromolecules. So in terms of proteins and amino acids are the monomers and proteins are the macromolecule. Anabolism is the synthesis of complex molecules from simpler molecules by condensation reaction. Now, what we are calling the condensation reaction, it's a reaction which involves the release of water. So if we are synthesizing means we are building up. And what are we building up? We are building up a complex molecule. And where is this complex molecule coming from? It is coming from simpler molecules. So that reaction of building a bigger molecule, which is a complex molecule, from simpler molecules, which we are referring to as monomer, involves the condensation reaction. It is an anabolic reaction. So, big from small, involving condensation reaction. So what is a condensation reaction? Now, condensation reaction, these are reactions that involve the synthesis of macromolecules. Now, when we say condensation reaction, it means that there is water which is going to be formed. We are going to form water. But it is a synthesis. Synthesis means you are building up. Now, in this illustration, we have simpler molecules here. These simpler molecules are going to be used as monomers. Monomers are the ones that we bring together, join together, and when we join them together, we form a bigger molecule which we call a macromolecule. But before we form a macromolecule, we shall need to form a bond between one monomer and another monomer and another. We have to connect them. And that process of connecting them, it means we are going to synthesize. Now, when they are connecting one another, they are forming what we call bonds. But before they form those bonds, they have now to release water molecule before a bond is formed. So connecting a monomer and a monomer and a monomer, we form a polymer. And what are we forming? We are forming bonds. And those bonds that are being formed, they cannot be formed unless we release a water molecule. If you release a water molecule, then you will form your bond. You release another water molecule, then we shall form a bond. You release another water molecule, we shall form a bond. Which means that for us to form these bonds, we have to eliminate water molecules. And that elimination of water molecules, when we are forming bonds, is what we call condensation reactions. So, the condensation reaction results in the release of water molecules. We have used monomers And these monomers have been joined together and we have produced products. Now, when a monomer and a monomer are joined together, they form what we call a covalent bond. And that covalent bond to be formed, we have to release a water molecule. And when we release a water molecule, then a bond will be formed. And when a bond is formed, we form products that we are calling the macromolecule. So monomers covalently joined together. Our monomers are these simpler molecules here. These simple molecules are our monomers. When we join them together, we are forming bonds, and those ones are what we are referring to as covalent bonds. They are the covalent bonds. So our monomers are joined together covalently, and for them to be joined together covalently, we have to release water molecule. And therefore, that reaction where we release water molecules is what we refer to as a covalent reaction. At the end, we release water molecules. Now we want to look at catabolic reaction. In catabolic reaction, we are going to break up. We shall break a complex molecule into simpler molecule. That is a catabolic reaction. You break. For example, we have our macromolecule here. And this macromolecule is going to be broken down into simpler molecules, which we call the monomers. Now, these monomers, they are separate, but they are coming from breakdown of a macromolecule. Before you break down this macromolecule, you have to break the bonds. And every bond to be broken down, you have to provide water to break that bond. If we are to break this bond, we have to provide a water molecule. If we are to break this bond, we have to provide a water molecule for that bond to be broken. And that one is what now we are referring to as hydrolysis reaction. Meaning that we are providing water, we are hydrolyzing. And when you provide water, those bonds are going to be broken down. And when they are broken down, now we shall get our independent monomers. And that reaction is what we are referring to as a hydrolysis reaction, meaning that we have provided water molecules in order for us to be able to get the monomers. Now, this one includes the releasing of monomers from the macromolecule. So our macromolecule here, this macromolecule here, has provided us with the monomers. But we provided those monomers by releasing water. Now this one is referred to as a hydrolysis reaction. Hydrolysis reaction, you have to break a macromolecule and you release the monomers. But you have to provide water. And when you provide water, that one is what we refer to as a hydrolysis reaction. And it is a catabolic reaction. Catabolic reactions, we are breaking down macromolecules through a process of hydrolysis reaction. Hydrolysis is the provision of water. When we provide water, that water is the one which is going to break the bonds, and after breaking those bonds, then we shall get our monomers. So the covalent bonds have been broken down, and they have been broken down by the consumption of water. That consumption of water is what we are referring to as a hydrolysis reaction. The bonds are broken and water is used, or water is consumed in the breaking of those bonds. Organic compounds. Now, organic compounds are carbon-containing molecules found in living organisms or living things. What we call organic compounds, these are carbon-containing molecules that are found in living things. Now, living things are made up of carbon compounds. Carbon compounds, those are compounds that contain carbon as a backbone. Now, there are few exceptions. Those few exceptions are carbonates and the oxides of carbon. Carbon forms organic life. Why? Because it has the capacity to form 4 covalent bonds. When you look at the electron configuration of carbon, it has the 1s filled with 2 electrons, 2s with 2 electrons, 2px, 1 electron, 2py, 1 electron, and 2pz with no electrons. So if we get this 1 electron from the 2s electron and we fill the 2pz electron, that means that it will be having 4 electrons which are not bonded or which are not paired. So it has 4 electrons that are not paired. Now, those 4 electrons which are not paired are the ones that it is going to use to form the 4 covalent bonds. And because of that, carbon is used as a basis of organic life, because it has the capacity to form 4 covalent bonds. Now, this allows it to form a wide variety of large and complex stable substances or molecules. Because it has that capacity to form 4 covalent bonds, therefore it can form a variety of large and complex stable molecules. And that is carbon, which is the backbone of all organic compounds. Now, let's look at the different types of organic compounds. There are 4 main classes of organic compounds. And these ones, we find them in living things. For example, we have the carbohydrates, we have the lipids, we have the proteins, and we have the nucleic acids. Those are examples or types of organic compounds that we find in living things. Now, we have the carbohydrates. The carbohydrates are made up of sugars, which we call the monosaccharides. Then we have the lipids. Lipids are made up of fatty acids and glycerols. And the lipids can be either fats or they can be oils. Then we have the proteins. Proteins are made up of amino acids. And lastly, we have the nucleic acids, which are made up of nucleotides. Those are the types of organic compounds that we have. Now, these organic compounds, which are the carbohydrates, the lipids, the proteins, and nucleic acids, are composed of recurring subunits. They are composed of recurring subunits, which we call the polymers. And this one we have seen. The carbohydrates, they are made up of recurring monosaccharides as monomers. Monosaccharides and monosaccharides, when they are combined, we form the carbohydrates. Then the subunits that form the lipids are the fatty acids and the glycerols. These ones are the subunits that form the lipids. Then the reoccurring subunits of amino acids are the ones that form up what we call the proteins. And the subunits, which are the nucleotides, are the ones that are going to form our nucleic acids. And these ones we refer to them as the monomers. Now, the exception is of lipids. Lipids, these ones are made up of subunits, but they are not reoccurring. These subunits of lipids are not reoccurring. When you look at the lipids for them, they are made up of fatty acids and glycerol, or what we call monoglycerides. But these ones are not reoccurring, like the way we have carbohydrates made up of monosaccharides. Monosaccharides, we call them reoccurring because you have a monosaccharide joining with another monosaccharide, joining to another monosaccharide, joining to another monosaccharide. So they are reoccurring. The same happens to proteins. Proteins are made up of amino acids, and amino acids are reoccurring. Amino acid connected with an amino acid, connected with an amino acid to form a protein. The same applies with the nucleotides. Nucleotides connected to a nucleotide, connected to a nucleotide, connected to a nucleotide, meaning that they are reoccurring. And when they are reoccurring, they form what we call the nucleic acids. But for the fatty acids or the lipids, they have subunits which are fatty acids and the monoglyceride, or what we call glycerides. These ones are not reoccurring. You can't find a fatty acid connected with a fatty acid, connected with a fatty acid, connected with a fatty acid to form a lipid. No. Fatty acids, they connect with monoglycerides and then they form a lipid, but they are not reoccurring. Now let us look at organic monomers. Organic monomers. Now, we have our carbohydrates. The carbohydrates, the monomers of carbohydrates are the monosaccharides. Monosaccharides are the monomers of the carbohydrates, meaning that they are the subunits. For example, here we have glucose. Glucose is a monomer that makes up the carbohydrates. And then we have another monosaccharide, which is a monomer, that is ribose. Ribose sugar. This one is also a monomer that are going to make up the carbohydrates. For example, those monomers we are saying they are the glucose and the ribose sugars. Then we have the lipids. Now for the lipids, for them, they do not have monomers. Lipids don't have monomers, but they have got subunits, which are the fatty acids. Fatty acids, they react with the glycerides to form up lipids. They are subunits, but they don't have monomers. Then we have the proteins. The monomers in the proteins are the amino acids. And when you look at your amino acid, it has the amine group, it has the carboxyl group, and the variable group. So we have 20 different amino acids. 20 different amino acids are the ones that we are going to use to form the proteins that we have. Then we have the nucleic acid. The nucleic acid, the monomers are the nucleotides. Those are the monomers that form the nucleic acid. And these ones will form the RNA and then also the DNA. RNA is made up of a monomer, which is the ribose sugar, which is a pentose sugar, and this pentose sugar is covalently bonded to nucleotides, which we have the bases, which are nitrogenous bases, joined with the phosphate group. It is joined to a phosphate group, and that one forms our nucleotide. A pentose sugar connected to a nitrogenous base and connected to a phosphate group to form what we call a nucleotide, which forms a nucleic acid. Let's look now at polymerization. Polymerization. Organic compounds can form complex macromolecules when simple subunits, which we refer to as monomers, are joined together via condensation reaction to form a polymer. Now we are looking at organic compounds. And these organic compounds, they are complex macromolecules. But they come from simple subunits, which we are calling the monomers, when they are joined together via condensation reactions so that they form what we refer to as the polymers. So when we talk of a polymer is the macromolecule. A polymer is the macromolecule. A monomer is the simpler molecule, or what we are referring to as a subunit. So when we get a monomer and combine it with a monomer, we get what we call a polymer. A polymer is a macromolecule which is coming from joining a monomer and a monomer. And that process is a condensation reaction. As we have seen earlier, a condensation reaction involves combining a monomer and a monomer, and we release a water molecule. When we release the water molecule, that reaction becomes a condensation reaction. And the product that we are going to get is going to be a polymer. And a polymer is the same as a macromolecule. So polymerization is whereby you get a polymer from a monomer. A monomer reacts with a monomer and you get a polymer through a condensation reaction, meaning that we are losing water molecules. Lipids are not composed of monomers, but triglycerides, and they don't have distinctive subunits. So because the lipids are made from fatty acids combined with glycerides, for them they form what we call a triglycerides. But these ones are not made from subunits that are reoccurring. Subunits that are reoccurring, they are the ones they call the monomers. But lipids, they are made from triglycerides, which are formed from fatty acids and glycerides. So they are not reoccurring, therefore we don't call them monomer. That's why we are saying that the lipids are not composed of monomers, but glycerides. And they don't have distinctive subunits. They don't have distinctive subunits, meaning that they don't have more monomers. But they are made up of units which are glycerides and fatty acids. So we want to look at organic compounds that can form complex molecules, or what we call macromolecules, when simpler substances that we call monomers are joined together via condensation reaction. Remember, via condensation reaction, we said there we lose water molecules and they form what we call polymers. So we shall look at the class, the monomer, the polymer formed, and then the bond involved. The first class are the carbohydrates. Their monomers are monosaccharides. And the polymer they form are the polysaccharides. The bond, which is between the monosaccharides to form the polysaccharide, that bond is called a glycosidic bond or a glycosidic link. The second class are the lipids. Lipids, remember, we have said they don't have monomers, but they have subunits. And those subunits are the glycerol and fatty acids. Those ones, they form a polymer which we call a triglyceride. And the bonds that are between the glycerol and the fatty acids, those bonds we call them ester bonds or ester linkage. Another class are the proteins. Proteins, their monomers are amino acids. The amino acids, when they react with other amino acids, they form what we call polypeptides. And the bond between the amino acids are the peptide bonds. Another class is the nucleic acid. Nucleic acids, they have monomers we call nucleotides. And when a nucleotide reacts with another nucleotides and another nucleotides, we get polymers. The polymers here we can get RNA, ribose nucleic acid, or DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. The bonds that are formed between nucleotides, those bonds we call them phosphodiester bond. So, therefore we say organic compounds can form complex macromolecules when simpler subunits we call the monomers are joined together via condensation reactions to form polymers. I don't want you to forget that condensation reaction, they involve the loss of water molecules. So all these ones that we have here, the polymers formed, polysaccharides, triglycerides, polypeptides, DNA and RNA, when they are formed, we release water molecules. And therefore, those reactions that results in the formation of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, they are condensation reactions. Organic polymers. For example, we have the polysaccharides. Examples of polysaccharides, we have the starch, and then we have glycogen. Those are polysaccharides, and they are polymers. We have the triglycerides. Triglycerides, these ones, they are polymers which are made up of glycerol and fatty acids. These are the lipids. Then we have the polypeptides. Polypeptides, these are made from amino acids and they give us the proteins. And we have the nucleic acids. These are the ones that are going to form the DNA and RNA, and they come from nucleotides. All those ones, they are polymers. They are organic polymers. Sugars, lipids, amino acids from molecular diagrams. Vitalism. Historically, it was believed that living things possessed certain vital force that was needed to make organic molecules. It was believed that living things, they had a certain force inside there. And that force was called a vital force. And it was the force which was making the organic molecules. This doctrine was called Vitalism and dictated that organic molecules could only be synthesized by living organisms. So this doctrine of vitalism, for it was saying that organic molecules can only be synthesized or made by living organisms or living systems. But in 1828, Friedrich Walther disapproved the theory of vitalism. And what did he do? He synthesized urea artificially from inorganic salts. He reacted cyanic acid with ammonia and he got ammonium cyanide, which gave him urea. So that means that urea is a compound that is produced by living organisms, but it can also be produced artificially by being synthesized. Thank you very much for participating in molecular biology. We looked at metabolic processes, anabolism versus catabolism. We looked at inorganic versus organic. We looked at the types of organic molecules, monomers and polymers, biomolecular structures, and vitalism. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye.